Hi, my name is Damon Lembi, and I'm the CEO of Learn It. I hope you enjoy your class. And if you do, please like and subscribe to my channel because we have plenty of more content coming. Have a good day.
Hi, James Jeffley here for Learn It. Today we're talking about how to build trust with your team. Trust is one of the cornerstones. It's one of the foundational pieces of every healthy relationship, whether it's a work relationship, personal relationship, neighbors, etc. If you don't have trust, it's really difficult to do anything else. I want to start by telling you a story. This is an old Chinese story about the emperor and the seed. One day, many years ago, an aging emperor who had no heirs decided that he was going to choose a new heir from all the children of the kingdom. So all the children of the kingdom were invited to come to the palace where the emperor said, "I'm going to give each one of you a little seed. I want you to plant that seed, add water, and tend to it for 1 year. At which time you will return to the palace with your plant, and I will judge who will succeed me." Well, one child, Ling, went home very excited. She showed her parents the little seed. She planted it. She watered it. She took care of it diligently. But no matter what she did, the little seed would not grow. She tried everything she could think of. She sang to it. She read stories to it. She had heart-to-heart conversations with the little seed about how it should really start to grow. She tried fertilizer and elixirs and special water blessed by hermits, but nothing worked. So 1 year later, she dejectedly returned to the palace to find that all the other children had produced beautiful plants. Ling had nothing to show except her empty plant pot. The hall was silent when the aging emperor suddenly called Ling forward. Ling expected even more humiliation, but to her surprise, the emperor declared her to be his successor, explaining that he had given all the children boiled seeds, which he knew would not grow. Only Ling had been honest and courageous enough to return to the palace with an empty pot. The point for us in this class is that building and maintaining trust can be a humbling experience, but the rewards are well worth it. Let's dig in. So let's talk about what we're going to explore today. We're going to talk about 3 things. Number 1, we'll talk about how trust is something that you keep building. It's not just a thing where you establish it and then you're done. It is a constant process. The second thing we'll talk about is this model called THREAD. It's an acronym. We'll talk about how to build trust through your team using this THREAD model. The third thing we'll discuss is how to balance these what we call trust domains. There are 3 of them, and I'll share those with you. While you're watching this video, stay hydrated, take notes, feel free to pause as we go along, and think about where trust shows up in your team and your relationships and where it might need to be strengthened. There will be some exercises that you can do along the way with a trusted colleague or friend to help you get the most out of this lesson. Who am I and why am I talking about trust? I'm James Jeffley. I've taught a lot of things around the world over the last couple of decades or so. And I've come to realize that in everything that I do, trust is an essential element. It is a cornerstone of every healthy relationship. Without trust, it's difficult to get anything done. I want to share some statistics with you now about some global trends in trust. So what does trust currently look like in our global society? Well, to give us an idea, we can look to the Edelman Trust Barometer. This was a study over 20 years in 27 different countries where they asked people a variety of questions about trust. And their findings this year, 2022, show that distrust is now the default, with 59% of people responding that their tendency is to distrust someone until they see evidence that the person is trustworthy. Now, for me, I grew up in a different time. I grew up in the time where I generally trust people until they give me a reason not to. But now, according to this study, 6 out of 10 of us are going to distrust first until they see a reason to trust us. Where have you seen this phenomenon occur? In the workplace? With family or friends? Have you seen it on social media? Distrust in science, distrust in doctors, the fake news, right? I think we should look at where this distrust is showing up and what might be the seeds of it, right? And then what can we do about that? Well, one of the places to look in the workplace is the effect, right? So here are 4 different places to consider. Number 1, do you ever sit around in a meeting and you're trying to solve problems or brainstorm or come up with some innovative idea and people aren't willing to share ideas? Maybe they have ideas or they shared ideas in the past, but not now. Why do you think that is? There's a lack of ideas. Maybe people have them, but they don't want to share them because they don't know if they'll get credit for those ideas. They don't know if what they share will be used against them in some way. They don't know if someone will steal their good ideas and benefit from them, leaving them in the cold. There are a lot of reasons why people may not be as willing to share ideas today as they were in the past. That could be a symptom of lack of trust. Here's another place to look: increased burnout. Burnout is not an on or off situation. It's like, oh, I was burned out yesterday, but I had a good night's sleep and I'm not burned out today. No. Burnout is on a spectrum. You go from not burned out to various stages of stress and anxiety, and eventually you get to burnout. It is a thing you want to avoid at all costs because it leads to various mental and physical ailments. So if you see more stressed out people in your workplace, if you see people who are trying to get it all done faster, hurry, more, and are just struggling with that, they might be headed towards burnout. And what does burnout have to do with distrust? Well, if people don't trust that their job is stable, they might be trying to do more and more to justify their worth to the organization. Higher turnover could be a sign of distrust in your workplace. People have had an experience with a bad boss, a bad manager, and they're like, I don't trust this person, and I can't work someplace for someone that I don't trust. So if there's a lot of turnover in one of your teams or departments or in your company, that's probably a sign of bad management. It could also be a sign that the employee just doesn't feel like it's a place they can trust their livelihood to. So they'll move on to someplace more stable. And finally, reduced organizational growth. If your team, your department, your organization is not growing, you're not innovating, you're not coming up with new things, you're not inventing new markets or ideas, if you're not coming up with new processes, new systems, new ways of doing things, that could be a sign of distrust. You distrust people's competence, you distrust people's ability, you distrust people's vision, right? So those are some of the effects of distrust in the workplace. I think there are also places for you to look at. This impacts our professional and our personal lives on a daily basis. And in the workplace, this lack of trust leads to fewer solutions, fewer ideas being shared. One thing to take away, I imagine some of you know what it's like to have a colleague or a boss that you don't fully trust, right? There's just something about them. Your antenna goes up, you feel on guard whenever you're around them. And if that person is your boss, what are the chances of you actually coming to them and saying, I don't trust you? In my experience, that's pretty low. Which is why, as a boss, as a manager, as a leader, the only safe thing you can do is to assume you can always do better. Maybe they really trust you. Maybe they don't. You'll never know for sure. So in order to not drive yourself crazy and stay up late at night worrying about it, assume that they do trust you. The point isn't to make you suspicious of your team, by the way. And they trust you because you commit to doing things every day, to building and maintaining trust with them. They see your effort. And just assume you can always do better. And act on that assumption. Act on that assumption. Trust is not a thing that you get to one time and that's it. You've got trust. It's a thing you have to keep building. And that's the theme of today's class. So we're going to approach it by looking at a host of different things you can do to build and maintain trust with your team. The key to getting the most out of this comprehensive model is to keep finding new things to work on and to improve, which is why we provide you with the following model called THREAD. Let's take a look at that. LearnIt has developed a framework for building trust, and it's summarized by the acronym THREAD, THREAD, which represents 6 steps for building trust with your team. These actionable steps include working together, being honest, being resourceful, being a resource to your team, empowering your team, staying approachable, and being dependable. Taken as a whole, these actions allow you to grow trust out loud or intentionally build trust with your team. With THREAD, you earn the ability to deliver results in uncertain seasons of business. We'll talk about tangible ways to develop these 6 skills, and we'll use the acronym as a self-assessment tool to determine which areas you can grow in as a trust-inspiring leader. So what I'd like you to do right now is, if you've got a sheet of paper and a pen, or you can do this on a keyboard, I want you to think and write about your particular strengths. Think about which of the elements of THREAD you are best at and most comfortable in. I want to take a moment to reflect on these areas. So I'm going to put them up on the screen. And I want you to rank each one from your least proficient area to your most proficient area. And if you want, give yourself a rating scale, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. 10, woohoo, I feel really confident and competent in this area. 1, not so much. So here are the 6 qualities or the 6 elements of THREAD again. So again, together, 0 to 10 or 0 to 5 if you want a shorter scale. How confident and competent, how effective are you with working together with your team? With developing a sense of honesty with your team? Being a resource for your team. They come to you looking for information or guidance. How empowering are you with your team? 0 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you want to use. How approachable are you with your team? Do they feel like, hey, I can call them at any time, I can ask them anything? How dependable are you with your team? And this is an opportunity for some radical truth telling here. Be honest with yourself. You don't have to share this information with anyone, but just between you and I, right? 0 to 5, 0 to 10, whatever scale you want to use. How do you feel about your level of confidence, competence, and effectiveness in each of these elements of THREAD? When you're done, add them up. What's your total score? If you did 0 to 5, well, you got 30 possible points. If you did 0 to 10, you've got 60 possible points. So check your math. What's your total score? When you're done adding, look at your highest ranked area. What is that? Which one of these 6 do you think you do really well with? I'm really good with working together or honesty or resourcefulness. Which of these was your lowest ranked area? Oh, I need to be more approachable, or I'm not always empowering. And don't take this as, oh, I'm a failure, I'm a bad manager. We all have things to grow on. We all have things to improve. This is just a tool to use to help you identify where you are strong and where you need to improve. So notice your high score, notice your low score. Now, we'll go through each of these. And as I go through each of these, pay particular attention to the one you marked the lowest, because maybe you want to listen to this a few times, that section. So let's talk about the first one. What is together? Together is about creating a sense of inclusiveness with your team. It's about providing psychological safety. It's about providing equal recognition amongst your team. It's about involved decision-making, not just having you decide everything, but involving your team in the decision-making process. For everything, maybe not everything, But for some things, absolutely. For a lot of things, maybe. We're talking about inclusiveness here in the larger sense. In our other class on this topic, inclusive leadership, that's more focused on the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging sense of the word. Inclusion is the culture in which people feel, a mix of people feel they can come to work and feel comfortable and confident to be themselves and work in a way that suits them and delivers your business or service needs. Inclusion will ensure that everyone feels valued and, importantly, adds value. So let's dig a little deeper into each of these. When we talk about psychological safety, team psychological safety, this feeling of togetherness and inclusivity requires a safe environment, right? If you don't feel safe going to work, you don't feel included, and you're probably not going to share good ideas. You won't be as productive. Amy Edmondson, who is a Harvard professor and author, introduced the term team psychological safety in 1999 and defined it as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is a safe place for interpersonal risk-taking. The concept has been identified by research conducted by Google, in fact, as an integral component of highly effective teams. And it is simply an environment where employees trust that it is safe to take risks. If you come up with a new idea, you won't be punished for that. If you fell short, you won't be immediately fired, right? Have you worked on a team that had psychological safety? What did it feel like? Did it feel more inclusive? Did you feel like you had the freedom to share ideas or take risks? How much more productive were you on a team where you felt psychological safety? Let me share some tips with you on how to foster psychological safety. You can build psychological safety by a thing called framing. When confronted with a particularly thorny problem, for example, see if you can frame that towards learning rather than execution. For example, if the servers go down, everyone knows the risks and urgency required, right? If layoffs are coming, uncertainty and fear escalate. When confronted with challenges like these, it's important to be honest, but that doesn't mean you have to amplify the panic. Inspire better ideas, contributions, and results by framing towards learning, growth, and teamwork. The psychologically safe option is to use phrases like, we need everyone's brains working on this. And you'll need to speak up with your ideas in today's meeting. Something like that. A second way is to acknowledge your own fallibility so that it's safe for people to speak up and it's safe for people to take risks. If perfection is the expectation, number one, you're never going to hit it. And number two, the goal is unreachable. No one feels safe to participate because you can't really do anything perfectly. If you have an environment where perfection is the expectation, then your mistakes are likely going to be visible to others. So it's much better to discuss how you plan to do better in the future than to sweep things under the rug. For example, you implemented a zero tolerance late policy, but then you realized you needed to make some exceptions because sometimes people get sick or they have sick kids or there's, an accident on the highway. Unforeseen circumstances that are beyond anyone's control. You realize that the policy is doing more harm than good, so you discuss with your team the intentions behind the policy, why it wasn't a good fit, and how you'll be addressing lateness in the future. Even simple phrases like, I may misunderstand your important ideas, can show that it's safe to make errors and that your intentions are good. So acknowledge your own fallibility. A third way to address this is to model behaviors. In other words, be the person that you want your team to be like. Model behaviors like curiosity or engagement. For example, you could use language like, I wonder, or do you think, or what if? And remain engaged while people offer their own ideas and opinions by maintaining eye contact with them and abstaining from the use of technology. Ask lots of questions. Be voraciously curious. Oh, that's interesting. How do you see that? Well, what else could we do? Oh, that's interesting. How do you see that working? Tell me more. Those are all examples of questions to spark engagement, to show people that you're really curious. Model the behaviors that you want to see. And the last one is to create inclusivity through interpersonal rapport and decision making. Solicit feedback and opinions from other people. Acknowledge people's individual contributions. Example, you could work on building a relationship with all of your employees by asking about their day. Hey, how's your day going? How's your morning? How was your weekend? Oh, we just had a big holiday. Did you celebrate? Did you go on vacation? What did you do? Where did you go on vacation this summer? Take an interest in people's lives outside of the workplace. No, this doesn't mean you have to be everybody's BFF, best friend forever, or that you have to have a social relationship with people outside of the relationship. But life is about more than just work. People do have a life outside of work that often affects work. And so take an interest in other people's lives, at least a little bit of it, right? Find out about their hobbies. Do they have pets? Do they like, certain sports or root for certain teams, or, what foods they're into, right? Those sorts of safe for work conversations. Make it a practice to engage with employees regularly, multiple times a week, so the experience of chatting with each other doesn't feel like it's a test for them or something that's forced or just really weird. And they know it's safe to offer information. And don't make this a one-way street where you only ask information from them without giving information about yourself, right? You ask them to share, then you share. Remember, there are lots of different ideas that I'm sharing with you today. And so don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all easy button for building trust with your team. It's a process, and there are many different components to this. So what I'd like you to do right now is to think and write about inclusivity. Take a few moments to jot down all of the possible things that you could do to make people on your team feel included. Could be activities, working together on projects, sharing interests about their day, finding out about and celebrating birthdays or anniversaries or special occasions. Take a few minutes, pause the video, write down some things that people can do, that you can do to help people feel more included on your team. Now that you've done that, I want you to take a few more moments to pare that list down by asking yourself, if I didn't do this thing, would I still achieve my outcome of everyone feeling included? So take a look at all of the things you wrote down that you could do to help your team feel more included. Then pare that list down. Number 1 on that list, if you didn't do that, would people still feel included? Number 2, if you didn't do that, would people still feel included? Number 3, if you didn't do that, would people still feel included? The point here is to get you thinking more intentionally about inclusion, about how you approach creating inclusivity on your team. You could take this exercise to your team and ask them, hey, what are some things that we could do as a team to have you feel more included? What can I do as a manager to have you feel more included? And you could do this anonymously. There are different ways you can set that up. We have 2 additional ways for creating an inclusive environment that I want to share with you right now. These are giving recognition and appreciation to employees and also involving employees in the decision-making process. So let's take a minute and talk about these. For recognition and appreciation, to give fair recognition to people, you'll need to know whom to recognize and how they want to be recognized. So ask your employees about what they're working on, what their successes are, their accomplishments. Check in with individual employees and ask them which of their team members has been the greatest help to them recently, or who contributed the most to their current project. These conversations should be light and conversational and not sort of a he said, she said, they said punitive spying. Your goal here is to stay positive and to be informed of who is actually making big contributions, devoting extra time to a project or working sort of behind the scenes. Recognition is about outcomes, achievements. It often comes with monetary or other formal rewards, but it doesn't have to. People can work hard on projects that stumble in ways that are not easily quantifiable. People can work on projects that help in ways that are not easily quantifiable. Essentially, don't wait for just positive results to validate and appreciate people's contributions if you want to foster an environment of togetherness. Don't wait for one big breakthrough or one big success. You can acknowledge people for progress. You've got to leverage both formal and informal, public and private recognitions and appreciations. For example, formally, you can have a space for authors or contributors to put their names on deliverables and thank them all for their input. Example, Zoe and Ben have put a lot of effort into reorganizing the project documents. So I'd like to thank them on behalf of the team for making our day-to-day workflow easier. Yay! However you choose to recognize or appreciate, make it a habit to recognize and appreciate in the way that the given person likes. There are some people who do not want a parade. They do not want a public recognition of their accomplishments or contributions. There are some people who would prefer a more low-key, private approach. So find out from each of your employees how they like to be appreciated. Some people might tell you, I don't need a big thing. Don't make a big deal. Just, a little thank you is fine. Okay, in private. Okay, so pick up the phone or see them in person or do a video chat and say, hey, I just wanted to say, really great job on, and then be specific about whatever it was they did. Give people recognition in the way that they want it. If other people want, yes, I would like to be publicly acknowledged, okay, then give that person public acknowledgement. The second part of this is involved decision making. Whenever possible, and I realize there are some decisions that you and you alone have to make because of knowledge, expertise, security level, confidentiality, whatever. Those are not candidates for involved decision making. But the things that do not require your level of authority or clearance or confidentiality, etc., those would be good candidates for inclusive decision making. So whenever possible, employees should have input on decisions that will affect them. You can solicit employee input via meetings, surveys, brainstorming sessions, one-to-one, ad hoc conversations, lots of different ways you can do this. But be transparent with people about who will be making the decision. Be transparent about not only who will be making the decision, but when they will be making it, and what influencing factors will go into the final outcome and how it might affect people and which people it might affect. This means you'll need to take employee input into account and value the perspective that employees offer. If it won't be possible to gather and use employee input in a decision, you can still practice inclusivity by considering the impact your decision will have on all stakeholders and communicating the thought process to them. One of the other things to consider with this is the generational differences of workers in how often and in what manner they prefer to be recognized. This information can be interesting, given that workers of different ages tend to have different preferences for workplace recognition and can be used to facilitate discussion or to tailor the dialogue towards the audience's age. In other words, recognition might look different to a baby boomer than a millennial or a Gen X or a Gen Z worker. Inclusivity might also have some generational considerations, right? You might find older workers, baby boomers, etc., may be more inclined to appreciate an authority type of thing. You just tell them what to do. They don't need to feel included. They'll just do that. Younger workers, not so much. They may want more of a say in what goes on. So don't discount the impact of the generational perspective on recognition and appreciation, as well as involved decision making. All right, we've talked about the T, the together part of the thread model for building trust with your team. Now let's take a look at the H, the honest part of building trust with your team. Trust clearly cannot grow in an environment where people are dishonest. So you must be a truthful leader. This means you'll need to share information even when it's uncomfortable, when it's bad news, or that may be difficult for people to hear. Avoiding communication with people creates an information void, which is easily filled with negativity and rumors and gossip. If you're honest, you open the door for others to be honest too. In addition to facing bad news head-on, honesty will appear as admitting your mistakes, taking feedback well, and offering sincere apologies when necessary. So lead with honesty, openness, and sincerity. You have to model vulnerability for people in order to foster those qualities in other people. Honesty really is the best policy, and it cannot undermine the other characteristics of the thread model. You may not have considered that the approach is more important than the content, although you know that honesty is the best policy. How you say it is more important than what you say in many cases. Have you ever experienced someone's honesty and it felt like you were better off without it? Yeah, sometimes you want the truth, but you want it with a little bit of honey on top. A little frosting, some sprinkles. Sometimes you want it gift wrapped in a nice box with a bow on it. Some people do not digest the truth well without a little bit of framing and a little bit of sensitivity. Other people, they might just say, give it to me straight. Bam! You tell them the truth. There it is. No equivocating, no frosting needed, no sweetness needed. Just tell them, here it is. You have to find out who likes their truth in what way. It's like some people like their coffee black, some people like it with a little bit of cream, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of coconut milk or oat milk or whatever. Go to Starbucks, stand in line for like 10 minutes and listen to all the different ways that people ask for a cup of coffee, right? It's mind-boggling. I think people order truth the same way. I'd like my truth black. I'd like my truth full of cream and sugar and cinnamon and nutmeg and all sorts of other things. So find out how people like their truth. Your default should always be to deliver honest information to people, but you'll find it worthwhile, I think, to check if the manner in which you're delivering it will lower your credit or credibility in any of the other thread elements. Let me give you some examples. You discuss an employee's recent uptick in tardiness, but you do it in front of several other employees. This does not create a feeling of togetherness or inclusiveness. Discuss that matter in private. But I told them not to be late. Yeah, but you did it in front of a bunch of other people, which embarrassed them. And maybe you're going to have some blowback from that. Here's another example. You declare that there's no budget for any extraneous work trips this year. Well, this does not promote the idea that you are a resource for the team. Share that since budgets are tight, you're looking into alternative ways, alternative ways for employees to attend conferences and receive training. Not that conferences and training are off limits, just maybe traveling to them is not a desirable way to go. And if we've learned anything in the last couple of years of working virtually or remotely, you can get a lot of stuff done on video. Here's a third example. You share that you feel completely overwhelmed with your current workload. And this sends the message that you're too busy to be approached right now. You're honest that you're swamped, but then how does that affect the approachability part of the thread model? So let employees know specific times that you have blocked off for working without interruptions, and then let them know what you're working on and how it will benefit them. And then tell them the times that you're open to hearing from them and how long you think it will be until you're back to working your normal schedule, right? But always block off some times for when you've got your head down and you're working, and times for when you are available to meet with people or have a conversation. So normally what we would do in a class is to have a breakout session and discuss this. And you can do this with a colleague or a friend. You can share some personal examples of where you have felt a sense of togetherness or honesty in action in the workplace. Or take a moment to think about that right now. When have you felt a sense of togetherness or honesty? People were being honest with you in your workplace. This can be something you've experienced from a leader, a manager, something you witnessed. It could be something that you did where you felt like you were promoting togetherness or honesty. So take a few moments and think about that. So we've talked about the first two elements of the thread model, together and honesty. And these are the first two traits to thread through all of your actions with people, a sense of togetherness and honesty. Psychological safety through framing, acknowledging fallibility, modeling behavior, and creating inclusivity. Recognition and appreciation through recognizing achievements or progress, appreciating value, and offer it in the way that they prefer, public, private, etc. We've talked about involved decision-making, solicit ideas and input from everyone, be transparent about the decision-making process, communicate the reasons for the necessity of the decision and for the decision itself, and appreciate people's contributions to it. And then finally, honesty, owning up to your own mistakes, delivering bad news tactfully, being honest without compromising. Next, we're going to talk about resourceful, empowering, approachable, and dependable. So we've talked about together, and we've talked about honesty as part of the first two parts of the thread model. Now we're going to talk about being resourceful. So what does being resourceful really mean? Well, trust cannot develop without displaying competence and being a resource for your team. Now that you've built this environment where employees trust that they work in an honest and psychologically safe team, you now need to support them as only a manager can. You already know that you're a competent leader, and this is where you can start to demonstrate that. There are times when people on your team may need some obstacles moved out of the way. They will come to you for that. There are times when they may need some guidance. Hopefully they'll come to you for that. There are times when they might need some approval on something or an additional resource for something. They come to you for that. So let's talk about some actionable ways for you to be a resource to your team. This is what your team looks for in you in order to really trust you and to view you as a resource. Number one, provide. You have to give employees the resources they need in a timely manner. This could be a helpful solution to a problem that they're facing, just because I think you'd like this idea, or a relevant tool for improvement. Some examples of the types of resources that you could provide include human resources, serving as a knowledgeable partner to work with or an expert on a certain topic. For example, when I wanted to change the way I evaluated my employees, a manager let me know of a coworker who had developed an evaluation system that I might be interested in. Another way that you can be resourceful is to provide financial resources, such as a grant for a project or bonus or investing in other resource types, hiring someone new, buying new equipment, training. For example, I had an employee who was ready to upskill in online marketing, so I offered to send her to a conference on the topic. A third way to be resourceful is to provide physical resources to your team, such as appropriate technology, laptop, software, hardware, etc., or meeting spaces. Example, offer your team a new interactive whiteboard to facilitate more collaborative meetings. Or if you notice they've been restricted by the current presentation tools, something to aid them in that. As many people have been working at home the last couple of years, offering to get people more comfortable chairs, ergonomic keyboards, a bigger monitor, ergonomic mouse, something like that, right? Physical resources. And the last thing you could provide to be viewed as a resource would be information resources, such as your own knowledge or professional trainings, relevant books, podcasts, blogs, and other media to refer people to for better information. For example, you could share with an employee your own experience of facing something similar to what they're working on, and how you dealt with that, or an author that you found particularly helpful when working on a similar task. So those are 4 different ways to demonstrate that you can provide to your team and be considered a resource. A second main area is to be an advocate. You have to advocate for your team in front of others. People need to see you taking a stand for your team, promoting your team, celebrating your team, rooting for your team. Your team needs to see you do this as well. This requires that you know what it is your team needs and think about what would be helpful for them. Keep notes for your employees. It's difficult to remember a lot of details, so you should have a brag file for everyone. Oh, so-and-so did this, that's amazing. So-and-so did that, that's amazing. So-and-so's working on this is incredible, right? Things that you can probably use in their performance review. Also keep things like their professional history, their current aptitude, their desire and capability for growth. Think past, present, and future. This will allow you to quickly make recommendations when opportunities arise. However, not all advocacy involves pushing your employees forward or further. You may notice an employee has been chosen for a role that they're not particularly suited for. They might be better in that role. They're not great in this role. Sometimes the reason why people underperform in a job is there's not a good fit for the job they're in. They took a job because they needed a job, and you hired them because you needed a person. That doesn't mean you're a good fit for each other, right? Maybe they would be a better fit for that other gig. So you can serve as a mediator to determine the best path forward for everyone. You can also be a resource for your team's social and emotional well-being. Lead with integrity. Align your actions and words. Walk your talk, so to speak. Check on your own emotional intelligence, right? Ask yourself questions like, how do I feel about this and why? What am I doing about my feelings? Why does this make me frustrated? Self-manage your emotions and show others how to as well. Get familiar with your own triggers. Don't make decisions when you're in a negative headspace. So you have to be the moral and emotional compass for your team. Demonstrate integrity, build other people up. So what I'd like you to do right now is, if we were in class together, we'd have a little breakout on this, but I'd like you to think about, where are you the strongest? In which of these 3 areas would you say you're strongest? Would you say you're strongest in providing the tools and resources for your team? Would you say you are strongest in being an advocate for your team and each individual member? Or would you say you're really strong as being a guide, a moral compass, a person who models integrity, a person who manages their emotions well? Which of those would you say you are best at? Providing, advocating, or guiding? Now that you've thought about where you're the strongest, where are you the weakest with these? Which one of these needs a little more attention or improvement? Providing resources, being an advocate, or being a guide. Now that we've talked about being together, we've talked about honesty, we've talked about being resourceful, let's take a look at the E in the thread for creating trust with your team, and that's empowering. What do we mean when we say empowering? It's giving your team the environment they need to thrive in. Individuals are typically more trusting if they know that you have their best interests at heart. So you got to invest in your employees. You have to build them up for success, which aligns with your goals. You both want the other to succeed. You want them to succeed. They want you to succeed. You all want the organization to succeed, right? And knowing that you all have each other's backs, that you all want each other to succeed, that helps build trust. You're in it for the same things. You have to empower your employees, and that comes down to creating a solid support system for people and allowing people to flourish within it. It's an extension of trust, which will be reciprocated by those who receive it. Someone once said, the path to performance excellence is built on trust and relationships, not increased monitoring or arbitrary metrics or busyness. With so many of today's employees working hybrid and even fully remote schedules, the need for trust and empowerment is greater than ever before. We've seen in the years since the pandemic began that simply being present in the building is not what leads to greatness. Never has been. Rather, we have to reach excellence through trust and relationships. Excessive check-ins, monitoring, follow-ups, all of those kinds of things erode trust. I'm not saying no check-ins, no monitorings, and no follow-ups. I'm saying excessive check-ins, monitoring, and follow-ups. Those tend to erode trust. And often we end up doing these things without even realizing the message that we're sending is, I don't trust you. All of this excessive monitoring and check-ins and follow-ups leads to micromanaging. And it can be hard to tell if you're actually micromanaging someone, and it's likely that no one's going to directly tell you, hey, you're micromanaging me. Instead, you may notice some of the symptoms of micromanaging. So here are a few warning signs that a lack of trust has led to micromanaging. Number one, you fixate on details. You're all about the small stuff. You're bogged down in all the little nitty-gritty tasks and decisions, and progress actually feels slower due to the process becoming overcomplicated. Sound familiar to anybody? Example, instead of asking for the previous month's invoices, you dictate the format in which the invoice is delivered, the order in which the information is organized, and provide the raw data. Or you complete a lot of check-ins, updates, and approvals. You're hesitant to allow progress without it. For example, rather than having your employees send information to the appropriate parties directly, you have to review everything they write and draft the emails with them or for them. You feel like you could be doing a better job than your employees. So you're not trusting your team's individual and collective talents. You're imposing your own ideas and expectations into the process, limiting their opportunity for creative solutions. Example, you have brainstorming sessions with your team, but most of those sessions result in your idea being chosen while the other employees' ideas are not, because you think you're more capable or smarter or more creative or better. Does any of this sound familiar? You fixate on the details, you create roadblocks for people, or you think you're more capable, so it's just easier to do it yourself? Take a moment and think about this. Take a couple of minutes to jot down a list of all the possible things that you could do to make sure the people on your team feel micromanaged. What? Did he say that right? Yes, I did. Take a moment, jot down all of the possible things you could do to make sure the people on your team feel micromanaged. Or what are you doing right now that might make your team feel micromanaged? Take a minute, pause the video, think about it, write it down. What are you doing that might make the team feel micromanaged? Then when you're done with that, Take a few more minutes to go down that list and ask yourself, is there anything I might be doing that in any way, shape, or form resembles what's on this list? Oh, I do that, and that. Oh my goodness. So think about all the things you could do to make your team feel micromanaged, and then which of those things are you actually doing? Pause the video, think about it, make the list of things that you might be doing that are micromanaging. Then, if we were in class together, we'd do a little breakout where you would share this with each other, but feel free to share this with a colleague. Based on what you've discovered in that Think and Write section, which of those things do you think, I really need to stop doing that? Because it could lead to micromanaging, and I don't want that with my team because it erodes trust. You can just think about it yourself and then make a plan to do something different, or you can share it with another colleague, another team member, or another manager. All right, we've talked about the thread model for building trust with your team. We've looked at working together. We've looked at honesty, being resourceful. We've looked at empowering. And now we want to look at the A in thread, and that is being approachable. So what do we mean by being approachable? Well, part of being approachable is to make sure that people are comfortable with you. They feel like they can reach out to you. They can call you. They can set up a meeting with you. They can ask you questions. They can come to you with problems or new ideas, right? They feel like you're someone who is approachable. So there are lots of ways to make people approachable or to feel comfortable with approaching you when you meet with them in person. And there's simple things like smile or making eye contact with people, or facing the person with your body rather than, looking away from them. Not being on your phone, staying visible, stopping by to say hi if you're working in the office. Now, if you're in a virtual environment with people, or they're in another state, another city, another country, these strategies can be a little harder to implement, but not impossible, and nevertheless, they're still achievable. Your efforts to remain approachable will need to be more deliberate and intentional in today's hybrid and remote work environments. So how do you do that? Number one, let people know what your schedule is so they know when you are approachable. Oh, okay, well, Mary's approachable on these days at these times. Number two, when you're writing people in an email, use a friendly tone. Be mindful of the words and the specific word choice and the tone of the language that you use with people, because you're not getting the facial expressions and the body language and the gestures in a text message or an email message. Schedule some time for small talk or personal chats for a couple of minutes at the beginning of a meeting. Another way to do this in a remote or virtual world is to have dedicated one-on-one meetings with your individual team members. And don't have all those meetings just be about work. Also have some time to check in with them about how they're doing as a human being, how their family is, how they're coping with everything that's going on in the world, right? So those are some ways to build approachability with people, virtually and also in person. If inclusion and belonging are the ultimate blocks in the pyramid of employee engagement, then open lines of communication between colleagues and managers are the glue holding all of that together. So everything we've talked about so far, togetherness, inclusiveness, honesty, psychological safety, all of those are essential elements in building trust with your team. However, none of them are possible without open and safe lines of communication. Not just within your team or your department, but within your entire organization. So being approachable, having employees that actually want to communicate with you is both a symptom of and an essential key to a trusting relationship. And we simply can't have one without the other. I want you to think about every interaction with your employees as either increasing your approachability or decreasing it. There is no in between. There's no static ground. You're either increasing approachability or you're decreasing it. They either leave the interaction with you feeling like, yeah, I could reach out to them again with important news or sensitive information or valuable feedback, or they feel less likely to do so. Oh, that didn't go well. I don't feel comfortable talking to them or talking to them about certain things. So with that in mind, let's look at some of the ways that we can build approachability when we interact with employees. You want to keep the lines of communication open and productive. So number one, you've got to remember the power lens. You have to pay close attention to the signals that your demeanor and behavior send. The power lens is about how people behave towards each other when there's a disparity of power. You're up here on the org chart, they're below you on the org chart, or maybe a couple of levels below you on the org chart. Essentially, the person with power tends to see people in a utilitarian way. Can this person help me? If so, I pay attention. If not, I don't pay much attention to them. On the other side of the equation, your direct reports pay quite a bit of attention to you. They notice the signals that you send in terms of the tone of your voice, your posture, your expression. So it's important that you both see and value your direct reports and send signals that show that you see and value them. How do you do that? With your voice, your posture, and your expressions. Or you risk breaking trust with people. Number two, you have to value conversations. You got to treat your time with employees as making a deposit in your trust relationship bank account with them, not as a distraction from your real work. Well, I could get some real work done if I didn't have to talk to my employees. Good luck getting that real work done without your employees. So your mindset plays a huge role in your interactions with people. And employees can read your moods very well. If they've worked with you for a while, they tend to know when you're in a good mood or in a not so good mood. Oh, don't talk to Bob today. Right? Even with 2 cups of coffee, Bob is not approachable. Remember, each interaction with people is an assessment. Are you trustworthy? Are you approachable? Right? It's a deposit or withdrawal from that trust relationship bank account. So if your employee senses that you're distracted or frustrated or upset or overwhelmed when you talk with them, then you've decreased the trust in the relationship, you've dialed up the fear, and you've lessened the chances they'll reach out to you in the future. So rather than trying to cover up your frustration or annoyance, make a mindset shift that focuses on the value of employee interaction, and remind yourself that you're making a deposit in the trust bank account. And the only alternative, as I said, is to make a withdrawal. And this might be an opportunity for you to be honest with people, to be vulnerable. Hey, I'm upset about XYZ. I'm concerned about ABC, right? The third thing to do to reinforce approachability is to ensure a positive experience with people. Make sure that the overall experience is positive, even if you can't control specific outcomes. We want to acknowledge that it's difficult to always be prepared for such a myriad of potential conversations with employees. It might feel like you never know what's going to pop up next. Who's in a good mood, who's not in a good mood, what just happened at home today. So you can't prepare for all of that. We know that we need to stay kind, we need to stay professional, and friendly when interacting with employees. But the thing we have to remember is that we are in a position of power over them. And that inherently makes their approach to us an act of vulnerability. Employees are taking a risk when they're bringing something to our attention. And these risks include, but aren't limited to, feeling foolish if the information is unhelpful or not well received, being denied what they ask for, or a loss in standing or reputation. Or perhaps something even worse, something potentially career limiting or ending. So as their manager, we want to provide a positive experience for them in response to their act of vulnerability of approaching us, so that they trust that it is safe to approach us again and again and again in the future, and to keep the lines of communication open. We're not saying that every conversation has to have an unrealistically positive nature. Rather, we can ensure that the employee feels positive emotions during our conversation with them. The positive emotions you offer could be encouragement, or support or recognition or hopefulness or a sense of being heard or a sense of personal connection. For example, you might say something like, I don't agree with the new policy of working from the office twice a week. That's something they might say to you. You might say to them, well, tell me more about your concerns. What is a compromise we could come to? I value your time and your work has been exceptional lately. You hear the difference? Right? All right, we're almost complete with the thread model for building trust with your team. We've talked about togetherness, honesty, being resourceful, empowering. We just finished talking about being approachable. The last one, the D in thread, is dependable. So what does dependable mean? It means aligning your actions and your words and your systems, your processes, procedures, etc., to ensure that they align with your messaging. We end thread with dependability because we need to complete all of the previous steps consistently. And being approachable is great, but what if you were approachable only 70% of the time, or 50% of the time, or less? Your employees couldn't trust which version of you they'd get day in, day out. Warm and friendly, or cold and disengaged. Other ways of showing dependability include following through on what you say you'll do, or staying predictable, not catching people off guard, or making instructions and roles clearly defined. Remember that you're helping employees overcome the natural tendency to fear risk, and this will take reinforcement. Frequently solicit feedback, consistently offer opportunities for growth, always empower your employees, make connections daily, and reliably provide positive experiences after they've risked something. So here are some tips for being dependable. Number one, set manageable goals. The number one way to demonstrate that you are dependable is to deliver consistent results. So use these tips to be consistent. Set manageable goals with people. Your goals need to be set at a level that allows you to dependably reach them. This is why perfection is not a great idea for a goal, because you'll probably never hit that. Have you ever started a new exercise program and placed very high expectations on yourself? I think we can all imagine how that turns out. Instead, set the bar at a realistic level. I'm going to go to the gym every day and I'm going to work out, 2 hours a day. Stop. You're not going to do that. So what is realistic? You might, but what is realistic for you? I'll go to the gym that one time and I'll do one thing. Okay, if that's realistic, then do that. And then what's the next realistic thing and the next realistic thing? Here's another example. You'd like to update clients about their portfolios more consistently. So set a goal to update them monthly rather than daily or weekly so that you're less likely to miss sending an update. Clients know they can depend on you predictably reaching out each month rather than unpredictably trying to reach out each week or even worse, each day. If you tried to communicate with clients weekly but often ran out of time, or didn't have the important information to share, then you demonstrate a lack of dependability. Somebody once phrased this as over promise and under deliver. You don't want to do that, right? You want to under promise and over deliver. In other words, set a dependable goal or set a realistic goal that you can be dependable with. And then if you shoot past that, okay, great. Number two, communicate your goals. In addition to setting manageable goals, communicate them. Keep your team informed about what your visible goals are and what the goals are for the team, and if you have set any specific goals for them individually. Make sure people know what it is they're working towards. Dependability has to be visible. People need to see each other being dependable. So share your goals to make it clear when you reach them. For example, you can let your team, your goal is to increase retention in your department. So you give updates at appropriate intervals. In this case, yearly is probably best. Provide relevant details, such as the actions you're taking to keep employees happy and the current retention data. Create reminders is another way to be dependable. Find a system that works for you so you don't let things fall through the cracks. Digital calendar, digital to-do list, reminders on your phone, pop-up reminder on your calendar, right? There are lots of apps out there. So think about an app or a tool that you use to create reminders for yourself, right? That actually work with you. And the last thing is to aim for consistency, not perfection. If you have a tendency for perfectionism, you know that it can get in the way of completing tasks. As Voltaire said, perfect is the enemy of good. So strive for consistency or progress over perfection. So I want you to think about and write 3, 2, 1. List 3 ways that you show that you're dependable to your team. List 2 ways that you could improve your dependability. And finally, list 1 outcome that could come from improving your dependability. 3 ways that you show it, 2 ways you could improve it, and 1 specific measurable outcome that could come from improving your dependability. All right, so we've talked about the thread model for building trust with your team, and it's a big list of traits to think about, and it could easily be overwhelming. So we want a big list because, again, trust is something you must constantly be working on. A big list will give you the ability to return again and again to thread and find value, actions that you can take. But it's also a big list. So here is an important way to divide the 6 traits up into smaller chunks. And we call these domains of trust. At its core, trust can be bucketed into empathy, competence, and authenticity. Empathy, because people can't trust you if they don't feel you're on their side. Competence, because trust isn't just about feelings, it's also about actions. And authenticity, because people will never fully relax around you if they don't feel like they know you, that they get you. So thread fits into these 3 buckets, which makes using thread and in action easier. So let me explain. First, you don't have to be perfect in every one of these categories. Every trait to effectively build trust with your team. 80% is actually good enough. 80% great is good enough. You don't have to be equally great at every trait. But you do want to make sure that you develop at least 1 trait from each of the domains: empathy, authenticity, and competence. So if you have a hard time acquiring resources for your team, for example, be sure that you're great at being dependable. If approachability is hard for, let's say, practical reasons like time zones and people never see you, or maybe you're a CEO of a giant company and no one gets to see you but the most senior leaders, then honesty is incredibly important. Finally, always be working on improving your thread. We call it a thread because we want to encourage you to thread these traits throughout everything you do. And trust is something you can never assume is done. You've got it. No need to think about it anymore. That's it. They trust me. Nay, 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 nay. What can I do to improve trust today? What can I do to improve empathy, competence, or authenticity today? Challenge yourself to always get better at thread or ACE: authenticity, competence, and empathy. I just made that up. So think about this and rank for yourself. Revisit your personal ranking. Remember that thing at the beginning where it said take each of those elements of thread and 1 to 5 or 0 to 5 or 0 to 10. How happy are you, confident with each one of those? Remember that? Go back to that original ranking. And then, especially the ones where you said you could improve, and then make updates to that list as necessary. You might want to visit this, especially as you start reviewing this class, once a week. Hey, what deposit did I make in the dependability account this week? What deposit did I make in the approachability account this week? What deposit did I make in the resourceful account this week, right? And then reassess weekly each one of those. If trust is an issue with your team, you have to look at this and take it seriously. Each week, where are you on each one of those elements of threat? I want to end up here by talking about waves of trust. Trust occurs at all levels of your business, all levels of your organization, individually, with members of a team, with you and your team, at the department level, the project level, the division level, the region level, if you're a global organization, globally, right? Self-trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, markets trust, societal trust, governmental trust, right? So the waves of trust illustrate the larger impact that building trust with your team will have. And it also relates to the next slide I'll show you, which details the larger global issues stemming from a lack of trust. Stephen Covey, who was a best-selling author and an expert in trust, tells us that trust begins at the individual level, with a person's trust in themselves. Do I trust me to be competent and approachable and dependable and all of those other things? From there, trust can grow in an individual's relationships with others. Then the organizations that house those relationships, and once a company has organizational trust, then the market begins to reflect that trust through the company's reputation and brand, and finally, trust blossoms outside the organization to the greater society. This is not an automatic process. It doesn't just happen naturally, organically. It needs to be consciously, intentionally built and nurtured in each category. But I think this opens our eyes to the greater impact of building trust and how essential it is, how it is a thread that is woven through everything that we do, everywhere, with everyone, all the time. Have you ever taken a small act and that small act ended up making a big difference? That's what working on building trust with yourself and with others can do. So what are these global trends in trust telling us? As I started, I told you that the default now is distrust. 59% say, oh, I will distrust people until they have shown me a reason to trust them. That survey also uncovered that the majority of us are distrustful, but it also found that business is now the most trusted institution. This survey indicated that people want more engagement from business, not less, and that communication from employers was trusted over communication from the government, media, and major corporations. So this actually gives us a powerful gift. In our current situation with distrust at such a high point, we have the opportunity and the obligation to increase trust amongst those around us. And this creates waves of trust throughout our teams, organizations, and communities. As someone once said, it is not enough to be silently trustworthy. When facing unprecedented mistrust, you must thread trustworthiness throughout all that you do with everyone. Small actions have large consequences via waves of trust. And if trust is at a low point, and trust is at a low point in small and large scale organizations, it also has small and large scale repercussions. It's our job to seize the opportunities before us and to deliberately build trust with our teams and start to create more waves of trust versus distrust. The reality is we've all been experiencing greater uncertainty in our lives. Changes in markets, business models, policies. Uncertain times put a strain on your trust while also demanding an increase in good faith. Your response to this uncertainty and trust vacuum matters. It's what can set you and your team apart and lead to greater results. It's not enough to be silently and passively trustworthy. The world we now live in requires deliberately building trust. Allowing trust to grow slowly, making an assumption that others trust you, and hoping that you're doing enough to build trust will all feed into the cycle of mistrust. Building trust with your team becomes an imperative and a key to solving problems. Remember that we must assume there's always room to improve our trustworthiness. It's not just a thing you achieve, it is a thing you have to consistently work at. We need a mindset of continual growth. Keep that focus, thread trustworthiness throughout everything you do. So here's some final takeaways. Thread is not just an acronym or a checklist. It is a balancing act that you can tailor to your strengths. You must thread trustworthiness intentionally into all your actions, not just at work, but at home with your family and friends and neighbors. And your small actions of building trust with people have large-scale impacts on organizational culture. I hope you've gotten a lot out of our time together today talking about building trust with your team. If you want more great information, visit offsitebylernit.com. It's a learning community of over 7,000 plus professionals who are members now. Its membership is free. It's dedicated to helping you learn or extend the learning after you take a class. You can pop in usually once or twice a week and listen to a subject matter expert, share a little bit of content on a relevant topic, and do live Q&A with the audience. So if you're looking to learn more, join Offsite by Learn It. Or if you want to learn more individually or for your team to learn more, you can set up a dedicated private class with your team or your whole organization. Visit learnit.com on the web to learn more. Again, for Learn It, I'm James Jeffley. Thank you for listening to this presentation on building trust with your team. Until next time, be well.